Hi everybody, welcome to Safe Diving and welcome to Q&A number 5. So yeah, this is the sort of my regular show now, where I go over all of your questions, comments, questions, queries, corrections, all sorts of things. Anything that you've said either on my YouTube channel in the comments section, through my sort of Instagram, if you sort of send me any DMs, or if you actually email me directly at flappysnaghazard@gmail.com, then yeah, I basically sort of go through those questions and I kind of elaborate on them here. So yeah, if you do have any questions, comments, queries, corrections, whatever, pop them down in the comments section below and I'll get to them next time. Okay, so let's jump straight in. So first of all, we're starting with Gallivanting SA. They ask, just a random thought, if I'm on Nitrox and my dive buddy is on air and one of us has an out of air emergency for whatever reason, what's the ramifications of sharing Nitrox Air? Okay, so to start with, it's not the end of the world. You can sort of switch from air to nitrox, depending on the depth. Obviously, it's more important that you do have something to breathe from, as long as it's safe for that depth. Basically, if you're in recreational levels and yeah, you do sort of switch onto a different nitrox mix, it's fine. For those of you who don't know, nitrox is where you basically get sort of normal air and then you squirt a little bit of extra oxygen in. It just makes it safer so that we can stay down for longer. It extends your no decompression limit, but it does limit your depth because higher percentages of oxygen become toxic at sort of shallower depths. So you can't go down as deep, but you can stay down sort of for longer. So if you're on air and your buddy is on 30% nitrox, let's say, yes, you can sort of switch to that. In the best case scenario, you change your dive computer sort of whilst you're in the water. A lot of dive computers allow for gas switching. But some of them do require that you set up the gas mixes before the dive. So, I mean, my dive computer, for example, you can sort of switch and just say, right now I'm diving on 30%, and then it'll adjust your decompression algorithm sort of accordingly, and that's the most important thing. If your dive computer doesn't allow for that sort of gas switching, again, it's not the end of the world, but what you should do is just do a safety stop, just head to sort of 5 meters and then stay there for as long as your gas supply allows. And then after you've done that, surface and then stay out of the water for as long as possible. Don't go diving again for at least 24, probably even 48 hours, just to make sure that your tissues are completely desaturated, because your dive computer is under the impression that you're just diving on air. So yeah, it is better just to reset everything and then you can start going diving again. Yeah. Try and avoid diving with someone who's on a completely different gas mix, because then they're going to have a very different NDL and no decompression limits compared to you, so they're going to want to stay down for much longer, but you won't be able to. So yeah, it is an interesting question, but yeah, best case scenario, you just update your dive computer whilst you're in the water. That's not really a big deal. It does require that you do understand how your dive computer works and how to actually do it. Worst case scenario, yeah, longest safety stop that you can do, and then stay out of the water for a couple days. The next question comes from Not the Real Morty, wearing an eye patch. Could you do a video on things a new diver should focus on when looking to purchase their first gear? So yes, this is actually sort of the way I take that question is, it's not just what 5 bits of dive equipment should I invest in first, it's more what features should I look at, because yeah, there are a million videos that are just kind of, oh, buy mask, fin, snorkel, dive computer, SMB, but what features are sort of interesting? Yes, that is quite a very interesting sort of video, and yeah, I'll try and sort of draw something together that goes into what to look for in a mask in brief, what to look for in a pair of fins. So yeah, no, that is a interesting question. Lee Moore asks, do you have any tips on attaching pockets to wetsuits? I have a 7mm wetsuit that doesn't have thigh pockets, and I was thinking about gluing some on. I found what seems like a good model of pocket, waterproof light pocket, but I'm hesitant to pull the trigger and glue it. Have you ever done it, or do you know anything about it? So yeah, obviously with the popularity of sort of technical shorts, as they seem to be called, which are just neoprene shorts that you wear over your wetsuit, that's definitely an option. If you want something a bit more permanent, then yes, you can glue on a pocket. You need the proper glue though. You can't just use super glue. Super glue doesn't really work very well in saltwater conditions. So you want a 2-part contact adhesive, something that's made for neoprene or made for sort of use in marine environments. And you'll usually get a tin and then a little what's it called, like an activator or something. You mix the two together, a little bit like epoxy, and then you leave it to go a little bit tacky, sort of on both sides, and then you squidge them together. Give it a good day or two, and then that sort of goes off. It's good because it's nice and flexible. It doesn't do anything in water. It just does its job. But you can stitch the kind of the seams. That will give it a bit more inherent strength, because if you just leave the glue, then it can, if you put heavy or bulky stuff in, it can start to kind of peel after a little bit of time. Stitching makes it a bit stronger, but it will allow water to get through the neoprene, so you get a little bit colder faster. If you can do a blind stitch, perfect, but that's quite tricky, especially by hand. Other than that, just use tape. You can get sort of dry suit tape, and that way the edges, the seams around the pocket are going to be glued on both sides, and that kind of sandwich gives it a real strength as well. So yeah, glue and tape is usually the best option. Chris Peterson asks, what are your thoughts on Hog D3 First Stage and Hog Zenith Regulator? I've heard mixed reviews, some people saying they're extremely underpriced for what they offer, and others saying they're cheap knockoffs of more expensive brands. Not too much info about them. Yeah, I can't really comment on this brand. They don't really exist from what I can see in the UK. I don't think I've ever seen them. I've certainly never used them. So it would be improper for me to say either way. But chances are, I mean, nobody makes a bad regulator. They literally can't make a bad regulator because they have to go through all sorts of different tests, especially in Europe. I think this is an American brand, so I'm not quite sure how the sort of regulations go through. But in the UK and the EU in particular, all regulators sort of deemed for scuba divers to be able to be sold, they have to go through all sorts of ANSTI tests and all that kind of stuff. So nobody can make a bad set of regulators. But I can't comment on Hog Gear because I simply haven't experienced them. Danny Holden asks, I recently switched to a DIR style backplate and wing. Do you know if there's a decent way to paint my backplate? I want it black. Pardon me, I want it black, but I think spray paint will just end up chipping off into the sea. Yeah, so I have seen some people, I can't think what it's called. It's like water dip kind of treatment, and what it is they get a big like tank of water, and then you put almost this like transfer material over the top of it, and then after a while that kind of gets soft, and then you kind of dip the backplate into it, and that's like a transfer that sort of attaches it. I've asked Mares how they do their backplates, because they got some funky colours. They haven't got back to me yet, but I imagine it's this kind of water dipping kind of treatment. Yeah, spray paint I imagine will just kind of flake off after a while, but I don't know. Look for some kind of metal paint, and look for something that's for outdoor use, because you don't want something that's just going to you don't want something water based basically. But I don't know, I think your best option is some kind of water transfer treatment, I think they're sort of probably a bit more robust. I don't know, maybe you can anodize it or something. It's a little outside of my expertise, but yeah, there must be something out there for sort of backplate and harness systems. Boston M asks, I'm looking to switch to a backplate and wing for my next BCD. I do mostly colder water dives, but occasionally will travel. For this, I'm looking for recommendations on a steel backplate and an aluminium backplate that can use the same wing. I was originally going to use the XDeep Zen and then get a Mars XR steel backplate to switch to. When I'm diving in cold water, someone told me that XDeep wings won't work with other backplates. Is this true? If so, could you recommend something? So, yeah, so XDeep, because they're a little bit different, they're not quite as traditional compared to sort of other plates, so they can be a little bit more exotic. I mean, the XDeep sort of range, they do come with a steel option, so it is very applicable to get their sort of aluminium wing and their their aluminium plate and their steel plate, and then just kind of swap over the wing. Yeah, I think the main problem that you'd come across is in the harness, because the harness going from a XDeep to a traditional like the Mars XR, the harness is kind of rigged up slightly differently. The waistband is a lot higher. It's not quite the same, so you'd have to invest in sort of twice as much gear. Whereas, yeah, I think if you just went for an aluminium backplate to start with, that will be suitable for your traveling. It will be suitable for your cold water as well. You just need to put like an extra kilo of lead on your weight belt, and then after a while, if you're really not getting on with it in colder waters, or vice versa, because I mean an aluminium plate is only about a kilo lighter than a standard steel plate, so it's not the end of the world if you're sort of traveling with it. So I'd recommend just going for one. Whichever one you want to be your sort of primary. If you dive a lot at home, then go for steel. If you do more traveling, go for aluminium, and then just kind of try it out sort of at home or traveling, because yeah, it's not the end of the world. You don't need two plates. I just have two plates because I do both quite a lot. And then yeah, if you do find yourself wanting a heavier plate, then yes, invest in either exactly the same, because that way it can sort of transfer very easily, or just specialize one so it's sort of really lightweight, and then specialize the other one towards whichever direction you kind of want to go. So I wouldn't rush into buying two plates to start off with. Just try one, either steel or aluminium, and then kind of after you've spent some time with it, go, oh yeah, I'll want to invest in a steel or an aluminium. Keith Baldacchino asks, what do you think about XDeep XEOs? So the XEOs it feels a bit like a token for me. It is XDeep's version of a traditional backplate and harness system. It doesn't have the same flair that the rest of the range has. So, I mean, it'll be good, it'll be fine, but it's fairly similar to any other kind of backplate. I mean, the backplate could be any brand's backplate. The harness, I think, is pretty much sort of standard, and then the wing, I think the wing's a little bit fancier than some others out there, but now, if you're looking at XDeep, then I'd spend a little bit extra, because then you'll get a nicer backplate. You'll get their sort of NX range with the inflator with fewer failure points. So yeah, I kind of skip over the XEOs and go straight for like a Zen or something, because it's just that little bit better, and it is worth saving up for. Sean Lotz would like to know, it would be informative to hear your thoughts on the deluxe type harness with the articulated rings that break the shoulder straps into two parts, and often chest straps at the same point as well. Dive Right and Zeagle both have versions of these that are intended for backplates. The Zeagle Deluxe harness, if I can find a picture, I'll pop it up here. I recently fitted my one-piece harness backplate for a female friend to try, and she was uncomfortable with how the 2-inch webbing felt under her arms. After doing some research, we wonder if this type of deluxe style harness could help, as she trained with a wing and would like to stay with that. So yeah, it might just be that the harness, it is a bit of a jump going from like a recreational wing onto just a single piece harness. It is very different. Yeah, they are more Spartan, but the kind of the deluxe style, they're kind of that halfway ground. I used to know one person who called it wannabe tech. They kind of want all the kind of fancy gear, but they still want all the creature comforts of the recreational style wings, so they have sort of adjustable things. And I mean, normal recreational wings, they still use the same standard sort of 2-inch webbing. It's just normally a kind of softer grade, so you're not really changing anything, especially under your arms, because that's usually where the sort of webbing sits. It's just you have extra padding, so it might be worth sort of considering just some extra padding. Like on the Apex one that I use, I just use a neoprene sleeve. That's more to protect my gear, so it doesn't sort of rub in one particular area. It's a bit softer. And then in sort of warmer waters, when I'm just in a rash vest, it doesn't dig into my neck quite as much. So that might be a consideration. All the extra sort of bits and bobs, if it allows you to sort of strip out, because you don't need 4 D-rings over your shoulders. That's just a bit gluttonous. You only need 1 over each. And if it allows you to sort of take things off, then yeah, I'm kind of on board with it. If you struggle with your mobility, then yeah, of course you can sort of swap it for a quick adjust. It's not the end of the world. It's, especially if you're not penetrating and exploring cave systems and you're not going into sort of deep dark wrecks, then it's fine. You can dive with it on whatever you want. I spent a lot of time in just recreational BCDs, and touch wood, nothing went wrong. It's just DIR style harnesses just reduce the chances of something wrong from happening. So it's not that I'm against these kind of recreational style deluxe sort of harnesses. It's just if I'm choosing something, I just choose something that has fewer failure points, because then the chances of something going wrong are reduced. So I'm diving a little bit safer. It's not the end of the world. So yeah, just go with whatever you feel is right, and whatever is most comfortable for you. Don't feel like you have to go down the exact DIR sort of route because someone on the internet said you have to do it. Screw whatever they say, screw whatever I say, do whatever feels right for you, and yeah, just enjoy your diving. Tony Warfield says, could you also make a video showing how to don and doff a backplate and wing in your dive equipment? I've been looking everywhere and cannot find a video on this. It sounds ridiculous, but a proper way to do the most basic things saves equipment and energy. Yeah, I suppose so, if no one else has done it. Yeah, I can definitely do this. I tend to right shoulder first. So when I'm getting fully kitted up, I'll put my exposure protection on, make sure that's nice and comfortable. Pay particular attention to socks, because one little thing, if there's like a teeny tiny grain of sand or something in your boot or under your sock, that's just going to rub, and that's going to sort of either create a sore or just be sort of really uncomfortable throughout your entire dive. So I pay particular attention to my feet. I brush them sort of religiously to make sure they're nice and clean before I put my boots on. Make sure there's nothing in my boots, because a buddy of mine, he squashed a black widow spider in his boot putting it on once. So I'm quite religious over sort of checking there's nothing nasty has crawled inside of that. So yeah, make sure your feet are really comfortable. Make sure everything's sort of in position. Put that on, and then I kind of check my dive gear, so I'll make sure everything's kind of there and ready for me to go, and nothing's on the floor. Don't put anything on the floor, put anything at a sort of waist height, so that when you're in your sort of BCD, you can get it easily without having to bend down. Weight belt on, make sure that's always on first, and then yeah, I'll sort of put my right shoulder in, left shoulder in, make sure everything's sort of in position, do a quick check, make sure that I'm sort of turned on. Probably do that first actually, and then yeah, just slowly take your time, put your dive computer on, make sure that's working, put your compass on, make sure that's working, sort of any hoods and whatnot, mask, fins, snorkel, let's go diving. Falcon 2000 asks, on rescue scenarios, is there something different when rescuing a diver in Backplate Wing? How do you get the system off the diver quickly if they're not quick disconnects? Having all the air in the back. So this is a two-part question, so I'm going to start with the beginning. In a real-world emergency, if someone's in a backplate and harness system, they don't have that quick adjust, so you can just sort of pinch clip it open. You cut them out. Just use a knife, cut them out. 2-inch webbing is cheap. Just, yeah, cut that out. You can faff around sort of trying to sort of manipulate them to get them out, but realistically now, if someone's in real trouble, I'm just going to cut them out. Screw it. I'd rather lose my entire twin set and all my regulators and all my fancy dive equipment if I'm unresponsive on the surface and they're struggling to get me out. Just cut me out of it. I really don't care at that point. I'm not going to protest if I'm unconscious, and I'm not going to sort of sue you at a later date if you save my life. So yeah, just cut them out. Having all the air in the back in sort of a wing style, does it make it more difficult to help the diver on the surface? I would like to try new things and get more advanced training, but the fact that I can only dive so on the surface, yeah, if you fully inflate a wing, it naturally puts you in a face down position. That's what it's made to do, so you get decent trim whilst you're under the water. If it's fully inflated all the way until the overpressure valve actually goes off, yeah, it's going to put them sort of face down, so just don't inflate it all the way. So you reach the surface, you flip them onto your back, and you use their inflator to make sure that they're positively buoyant. But if they do start to sort of roll over, just deflate their BCD a little bit, and that will sink them down a little bit into the water, and then yeah, you can stay sort of face up on the surface. So it's not the end of the world, it just means that you can't fully inflate. But that will happen with any BCD. If you have a jacket style BCD fully inflated, you've got air down in your hips that wants to come up, so that will sort of roll you over. So yeah, it's really not the end of the world. Ji Yang asks, do you prefer silicone neck seal to latex neck seal? Yes. Yeah, 1,000 times yes. I started off with latex neck seals because that was the golden standard, but nowadays, yeah, I'll take silicone over latex any day. It just has so many sort of pros over it compared to a latex. So latex, you need to stretch it out before you use it when it's brand new. I had a dry suit choke me out once because it was brand new and they hadn't stretched it over anything, and I put this thing on, and yeah, after 40 minutes or something, I just had to take it off because I was just feeling faint. Silicone, you can sort of wear it straight out of the box. It's not particularly tight, it's more flexible. I know some people find that it sort of rips and tears a bit more frequently. Touch wood, I haven't had a problem with it. I find they're more flexible, so getting in and out of it is much easier. The biggest sort of improvement though is that you can change a broken seal in 5-10 minutes. Latex, you have to glue it in, and the glue can take 24 to 48 hours to properly bond. It's that 2-part contact adhesive. So with silicone, it's just a 2-part sort of clamp system around your neck. So it's so much faster to sort of swap it over, and you can do it pretty much without any tools. So yeah, I'll take silicone over latex any day. Richard Slater asks, why do you use these shorts, kind of technical shorts with pockets, instead of the pockets that hang from BCD harness and strap around your leg? For that exact reason, because you've got an extra strap and it's kind of clipped and it's attached onto your BCD. So if something happens, if we go back to our sort of rescue scenario, yeah, it's an extra strap that they have to think about, and it's kind of extra gear and whatnot. Whereas if you're just wearing pockets, you just kind of pull them up and they're on. If you have this extra like sort of holster on your thigh, then yeah, you've got an extra sort of thigh strap that's going around, and you've got this kind of extra clippy bit, which if it's not done properly, or if you undo it accidentally during the dive, then it's going to slip down your leg. So no, I'll just stick with shorts because they're attached around my waist, and they're kind of this independent thing that stays in position. Whereas if you've got this extra kind of flappy sort of pocket pouch that's kind of attached to the bottom, it's just a little bit needless. So yeah, it's just extra failure points in my book. Heidi Morad asks, I was thinking of buying an oxygen clean regulator, okay, to use on 100% oxygen stages. I was thinking of getting a Scuba Pro Mark 25 first stage, fancy, like the rest of my setup. But I think it's way too much first stage to only use at 6 meters depth. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, pure oxygen, 100% oxygen, below 6 meters is toxic, so you'll black out. So don't take pure oxygen. This is why when anyone on the news or whatnot says a scuba diver strapped on their oxygen tank, no, we didn't. Oxygen is toxic at depth. Sorry, so I need your opinion on that. Should I keep my entire setup identical, or should I get something like a Mark II, since it will be only used at 6 meters on 100% oxygen? Another question, as an instructor, do you believe open water skills should be taught with students on their knees or in trim position? Well, that's an easy question. Yeah, I used to teach a lot of students on their knees because that's how I was taught. I didn't really think much about it, but yeah, I think the general consensus is now we're starting to sort of get them to sort of maintain neutral buoyancy whilst they do their skills, because it's a bit more real world. You can't always just descend down to the bottom to clear your mask. You kind of have to do it sort of trim. So yeah, if I was still teaching, I'd start to sort of get them off the bottom and get them sort of neutrally buoyant to practice their skills. But yeah, back to the original question. Yeah, if it's just your sort of final deco stage, it's sort of 100% oxygen, then yeah, I mean, if you have the money, then sure, go for the Mark 25. But it is a lot of first stage for what you're going to need. Realistically, you're going to have, what, 2 hoses coming out of it, a pressure gauge and a second stage. So yeah, the Mark II Evo is a wonderful first stage. It doesn't have any of these sort of fancy frills that you get. It doesn't get the swivel turret or whatnot. But realistically, it's all you really need for a stage cylinder. So yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to going for the Mark II. Save yourself a few quid, and yeah, you can spend it on, I don't know, another dive knife or something for your dive computer. So yeah, no, personally, I probably wouldn't go out of my way to go for the Mark 25 unless I just won the lottery. But yeah, the Mark II will do the job, and yeah, you, as you say, you're only going to use it at 6 meters or 5 meters. So yeah, why would you want anything fancier? Angad S asks, what's your view about second stages with pilot pneumatic valves? I believe the Legends series have these. I don't know about Legends, but they're fine. I used to have a set of Omega 2s back in the day, and yeah, they're exciting. They work in a slightly different way. A lot of them are upstream as well. I used to have a set of Poseidon Extremes, which I believe are sort of pneumatic, and yeah, when you breathe, you give a lot of gas. So in an emergency, yeah, it can deliver plenty of gas. They're a little worrying when you first buy them, because every time you pressurize your regulator, they give a little whoosh. of gas and then sort of seal themselves. It's just the way the sort of pilot valve on the inside moves. But yeah, I'm not objective to them, or I don't object to them. They're fine. Yeah, right now I'm diving a traditional downstream set, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with them. Chrome XFZ09 ask, I have a question for your Q&A. What do you do when you're thirsty on longer tech dives? What's your setup? Do you have a camelback underwater with you? I mean, I don't do that many long dives, but you can just bring down a bottle of Lucozade. As long as it's a kind of squidgy bottle and there isn't a big sort of air pocket inside, it's not going to sort of squeeze or anything. So yeah, deep breath of air, second stage out, secure that, just sort of squeeze it in, have a drink, and then sort of have another breath. Yeah, I think some divers do bring down sort of camelback, so you've got this sort of soft pouch and then a straw that you can suck through. But yeah, you can just get away with just a normal sort of sports bottle that has that kind of sort of nipple on the end, so that you can just sort of inhale or sort of drink through it. But you don't need anything overly fancy. Atoll D. There are backplate and wing setups such as the Scuba or X-Tech, XDeep NXZ. There are a lot of X's in our names. Halcyon, etc. How do they compare with each other and custom build through the local dive shop? Are their components interchangeable, or is it better to literally build your own BCD from scratch? And what if there are no dive shops nearby and you must rely on online ordering? So XDeep is the only one that's a little bit more exotic. They don't always kind of line up. If you're mixing brands, try and avoid that. If you can stay to a single brand all the way through, then you're not going to have any problems, especially if you're sort of swapping over wings for different setups. But yeah, the Halcyons and the Scuba Pros, the Apex, the Hollis, they're all pretty similar. They're going to have sort of ever so slight sort of changes, but realistically they're pretty traditional. They don't stray too far from the line. XDeep, yeah, they are a little bit different, but if you only stay with XDeep, then you're going to be fine. Trying to sort of build something custom through your dive shop, yeah, I think it's literally either sort of get one piece at a time and sort of check to make sure it's compatible. I mean, they're not going to want to special order sort of one obscure part in, and then you turn up and you go, oh no, it doesn't fit, and then they're kind of stuck with it. They're not going to enjoy that. But yeah, if you go sort of spend time with a dive instructor, and they'll sort of go through all the different parts, and they'll kind of work out, oh, okay, well, you're going for this backplate, then yeah, sort of this harness, yeah, that should work with it. This wing should work with it. If you don't have that option, then it's kind of down to the dive forums. Try and sort of ask them, oh, I've got this. Can anyone sort of measure the sort of distance of the grommets on this wing? I want to see if it lines up, because they're usually pretty good. If not, yeah, just stick to the same brand. If you're sticking to the same brand, then yeah, you should get away with just sort of ordering the stuff all online and then just assembling it yourself. There's never that much degree of sort of difference when you're sticking to a single brand. Mark Gardner asks, how about a video on regulator cleaning? I've got one coming up on the Scuba Diver Magazine channel. If you donate your Octo, so this was on the one talking about COVID-19 and sort of primary donate. If you donate via your Octo, would giving the free flow button a press during your sort of pre-dive safety check not be enough to check it if you smell and taste from your own primary? So yeah, with that, you're checking the gas, you're making sure that it smells and tastes fine, your primary is working. Your Octo, you can sort of press that purge button, but one thing that you're not checking with that is that when you exhale into it, the exhaust valve is working properly. Sometimes if you don't sort of wash and clean them properly, the exhaust diaphragm, the sort of mushroom valve can kind of stick all the way around, so you literally can't exhale. It's a real hard to try and push that valve open. When you hit the water, it's less likely to be an issue, but yeah, I just like to fully check as if, yeah, that one is definitely working. Now I have to disinfect it. Yeah, that was kind of the whole point of the video. But yeah, I like to physically check all of my dive gear before a dive to make sure it's all working fully. Yeah, before I jump in. Enzams1 asks, what's the new wing that you're waiting on? So on my twins, I dive a Mars XR wing. I think I mentioned in that video that I was waiting for a different wing. Apex actually have a new wing. It's the WTX D40T, I think it's called. I've seen it, I've played about with it, but I don't think it's on the market yet. It might be a secret, so don't tell anybody. But yeah, that's the one that I'm holding out for upgrading to. Saeed El Gohari asks, I can't find other coloured webbing options online. He's based in the Netherlands. Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, you can normally buy sort of coloured webbing online. Just sort of search for 2-inch sort of heavy-duty webbing. And it comes in a whole range of colours. You usually have to buy quite a big spool, like 10 metres of it, but at least you've got spares. And yeah, you can normally get every colour under the sun. Just make sure that you're getting the right stuff, because 2-inch or like 50 millimeters webbing, you can get stuff that's like sort of seatbelt material. That's too thin and too sort of slick for a backplate and harness setup. So you want the heavy duty sort of nylon stuff that's really quite stiff. So yeah, make sure that you get a good sort of look at what you're getting. And yeah, realistically, if you want something a bit more exotic like your blues and your oranges, then yeah, you might have to buy a big spool of it. Kevin Green asks, I recently switched from a jacket BCD to a backlit and wing. I found it much easier to stay horizontal with the air on my back, but I don't think I'm getting the full benefit, as I was taught to use my dry suit for underwater buoyancy control and not the BCD. What are your thoughts? Yeah. So I used to teach people in dry suits that your BCD was for the surface. You're under the water, it's all sort of dry suit, because when you're using your dry suit to control your buoyancy, you're also adding warming sort of insulation to keep you nice and warm. So yeah, and also you only have one sort of airspace to control your buoyancy. So as you ascend, you don't have to dump your dry suit and your BCD. You only have one thing to consider. When I dive personally, it's a mixture of both, to be honest. So yeah, the trim sort of issue, if you're using a wing and it gives you decent trim, that's because it's supposed to. So so what I do is I go down, I normally top up my dry suit to relieve a squeeze, and so that I'm nice and comfortable, and then I start using my my BCD, because yeah, that gives me a nice sort of position in the water. As I start to come back up, my dry suit has an auto shoulder dump, so that automatically dumps any expanding gas, so I don't have to physically do anything to that, and then I can just use my left hand to sort of control my buoyancy using my my BCD. So yeah, the real sort of thing is just do whatever feels natural. Just be aware that yes, you do have two separate air spaces that you do need to sort of dump in case you're or sort of as you're ascending. So yeah, do a bit of both. Nikki via email asks, currently watching your latest Q&A video. I thought I'd email. Blah, blah, blah. I recently bought a twin set from a retiring member of my local club, but he has it inverted with a stand from Kent Tooling, link. I'm yet to jump in the water with them, but I'm not sure if I should even bother with them inverted. Just wondering your opinion. So inverted tanks, they do make a lot of sense because your valves are down sort of by your hips, so they're very accessible. If you have limited range in your kind of shoulder movement, then shutdown drills can be quite awkward because it's behind you, and sort of identifying where something comes from. Whereas if you can kind of see it, then yeah, it's all sort of in sort of arm's reach. So I'd probably give them a go. The only downside is that sort of hose lengths all have to be adjusted, because your valves or your first stages are no longer up here, they're down here by your butt. So you now have to sort of adjust the hose length so that they're correct, or at least more practical, and hose routing gets a little bit more elaborate. It's not the end of the world, but it does take some sort of consideration. So what I'd say is try and do like a couple of dives at least to try it out, and sort of see how it works. But if you find that you're really not getting on with it, it shouldn't be that tricky to sort of remove them. They're normally sort of bolted on somewhere around the necks, around the collars of the cylinder. But yeah, it shouldn't be that much issue to sort of swap them over. Just make sure that if you're moving any sort of twinning bands, don't twist or kind of move the tanks around, especially if they're pressurized. Try and do it without moving them as much as possible. The next one sort of comes in and they ask, I currently misplaced all of my Cert cards and looking at ordering new cards, but Paddy charges a lot even for an e-card. And with about 6 Cert cards, Open Water Advanced, Deep Dry Suit, Nitrox and Rescue, it will cost a couple of £100. Any advice on sort of what to get replaced, or is there a way to sort out cards without making me bankrupt? Yeah, it is expensive to replace Cert cards. I wouldn't bother swapping all of them. When I go diving, I normally carry like 1, maybe 2. So I usually carry my highest certification, so instructor, and then I usually bring my Nitrox card as well. That's about it. Your as soon as you've done your advanced open water and your rescue, you made open water redundant. Advanced open water is redundant because you can't do rescue without doing advanced. Deep, I've never been asked for my deep cert card. Dry suit, unless you come across a particularly sort of obnoxious dive centre. I think as long as you can show that you've dived in a dry suit in your logbook, then that should be sort of enough. Nitrox is pretty important. It's nice just to, there it is. So yeah, I'd probably get Nitrox and Rescue. That's about it. If push comes to shove, any Paddy pro can actually log on to Paddy's website and sort of search for your details online, just using your name and your date of birth, and it will just list all of your sort of certs. So yeah, it's, as long as they have internet connection, it's not really an issue. Sometimes you might have multiple sort of entries. So I looked myself up once years and years ago and I actually had 3 different sort of records, as it were, because one of my instructors, they used my full middle name, the other one only used the initial, and a third instructor didn't use any. So I'm kind of spread across 3 different records. So if push comes to shove, and they do have internet, you're not somewhere remote, then yeah, they can literally look you up and just go, oh yeah, he's certified to do dry suit, that's fine. Emma H89 asks, where did you get those bungee elastic straps to hold your gear against the webbing to stop flappy snag hazards? I don't think they're a separate part. They came with, so I have these sort of elastic webbing loops. There's one over there. And yeah, these guys, they go over my sort of 2-inch webbing just underneath my my D-ring, and it just means that it sort of tucks the torch out of the way and stops that from flapping around. Some divers, the sort of old school divers, they just used to use a sort of section of inner tube, and they're just a bit of a pain. They're a bit awkward to get, especially with clunky gloves. So so I use these guys. This is just like 1.5-inch wide sort of elasticated webbing. I don't think it's a separate part, but just pop Apex an email and see if they can sort of send some out to your local dive centre. If not, I can't imagine it's that hard to get hold of, especially online. And all it is, they just sew it in a loop. So yeah, I imagine you could make your own, and maybe that's a gap in the market. And finally, Dominic C asks a question for the next Q&A. I'm considering switching to backplates. Do you recommend just putting lead on a belt or adding pockets to the harness? For now, I prefer the comfort of quick release jacket pockets over a belt, but maybe I'm wrong in this. So there's no right or wrong. It's very much sort of what you prefer. Personally, I prefer a belt because it's quite traditional, and sort of when I'm diving, it's usually in a dry suit, so I don't really feel it on my hips. You can add integrated weight pockets. It's not an issue. It's an additional cost, but it's an optional cost. So you can sort of pay the money, and you do get these sort of weight pouches. They'll be pretty much the same as a lot of the others, mainly Scuba Pro, because they usually have pinch clip releases, which are a bit stronger. Some of the sort of grab handles, there are reports of people just losing their leads. It just kind of slides out. But with pinch clips, you've got to go some to accidentally activate those. Just make sure that they do integrate to your harness properly, and the best ones sort of physically attached to the backplate itself. They usually have a grommet that you can attach. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with them. It's not a matter of sort of right or wrong. It's just a matter of sort of what works for you and what's sort of most comfortable. I don't like them because they make the entire setup much more heavier. I can have a separate weight belt and sort of control that. Whereas if it's kind of all on the BCD, that entire thing makes it really heavy, and then I have to kind of lift it up. There is a benefit to it. If you need to ditch a little bit of lead, you can ditch a little bit of lead, whereas with a weight belt, it's kind of all or nothing. So yeah, it swings and roundabouts. It's whatever's comfortable for you and whatever works for you. So yeah, just go with sort of what you want. And those are all of my questions. There are a ton of questions coming through, which is really nice. I try and get to all of them, and if I don't, then I am very sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of questions and queries that's sort of coming through, and I do my best to sort of get to you. If I don't, then just give me a little nudge just to ask the question again. But yeah, if you do have any questions, comments, queries, sort of worries, anything that you want to know about sort of scuba diving or even free diving, then yeah, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.